Welcome to Quit Playing with Yourself.
Or alternately, Jiu-Jitsu games.
So we're going to have 3 sections in this instructional. The primary game modality that we use at my academy, we call Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu, which if you know what this is already, great. If not, you're going to learn how to do it.
So Rob, Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu is a rather aggressive term.
Yeah.
Where does this come from?
So this comes from my brief time training with Ryan Hall, who obviously is a huge influence on me. If you haven't heard that already, you will hear it now and again. Ryan gave a speech in class while I was there where he described the phenomenon of if he would walk into someone's guard and get swept 99 times, on the 100th time, he was going to approach the guy's guard like he didn't give a fuck about his jiu-jitsu. And he was just going to try to figure out a way to beat him. And that kind of it stuck with me, and it stuck with me to the point where obviously I didn't think I could take the average human being or even, most human beings and give them the mentality of Ryan Hall. So I tried to create a game around replicating that circumstance without somebody necessarily having that sort of, exploratory attitude or, willingness to throw themselves into the fray to develop a technique without being dissuaded by losing, lack of success, right? And that's really the genesis of the idea of Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu is we want to take losing out of the equation, because if anything holds people back from development, it's either the fear of losing or sometimes the desire to win too much, both of which lead people to stay within a very narrow kind of confine of what their ability already is, and they don't want to explore outside of that.
They've got a good closed guard. That's all they're ever going to go for.
Exactly. It's a form of constraints-based learning. So a lot of the gamified stuff that we see becoming more popular in the jiu-jitsu world these days is based around the idea of constraints. And so that is a lot of what we'll be working with. Generally, though, constraints tend to be used either by both participants to some degree. The specific advantage of the Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu approach is that there is a constraint on one person largely. And the other person is pretty much allowed to do whatever within the context of the game. So it allows for, let's say, a level of modular experience, which is to say I, as a black belt, can play this game with a white belt and I can set my own level of difficulty. We'll talk about that a little bit further in the actual Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu section. But the idea is that you should be able to get very good training almost regardless. Obviously, there's going to be extreme examples, but almost regardless of the level of your training partner. So that's the main type of game that we're going to do. And this is very good at getting people to develop what most people consider intangible skills. Things like being difficult to sweep. Up until very recently, guard retention was considered to be a bit of an intangible skill. We have obviously some instructionals out there that people have used to get quite good at guard retention. I've been using Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu guard retention rounds specifically to develop my guard retention for 10 years. And it's one of my strongest things. I tend to compete without any fear of having my guard passed because of how much I do that. So that's going to be the first section. The second section is going to be basically specific positional sparring, which again will be very different than, let's say, a typical, hey, we're going to start in half guard and we just do whatever from there. We're going to have constraints, again, in this case, on both participants. Yourself and your opponent are going to have certain conditions that are win conditions that you can meet. And once that happens, you're going to reset and start again, rather than just starting in the position and sparring to, just to a guard pass or to a submission or whatever. It's going to be a little bit more specific than that. And then it will allow you to develop the skills necessary to achieve success in all of the different positions that we're going to show you. And then finally, we're going to talk about mini games. Mini games are very highly focused, extremely constrained methods of developing specific movement patterns and skill sets. So that one is, and it's a small section because frankly, you could create mini games out of so many things that we could be here for 10 hours. So we're going to we'll get the ball rolling for you. We'll sort of show you a few different mini games that you can use to develop certain things. This is an example of a few different games, and you can take that and design your own. And obviously the idea behind this, if you're somebody without access to as much coaching as you would like, or you're a coach yourself and you want to develop your own games, hopefully the template that you will see created throughout these volumes, and also particularly the mindset stuff that we're going to talk about, which is how to play these games. I always say that half of my job is teaching jiu-jitsu, the other half is teaching people how to learn jiu-jitsu, because I can give you a game, and if you're just trying to win the game at any cost, you will break the game to win the game. And so as long as we can get you outside of that mindset, the idea that games are to be played more so than to be won or lost, and you play these games while investing in your development, your partner's development, and exploring the movement patterns that we're trying to create, you will be very successful. So we'll talk about mindset throughout as well. And if you can combine all those things, I think you're going to have an avenue towards vastly accelerated development in jiu-jitsu. I know that's been the case for me.